Hello friends and welcome back, and I do say that as if I haven't been off the air for about we're in April. It has been 4-5 months and no one's seen or heard anything of me. So, needless to say, 2020 has been a wild year. There were floods, there were fires, there was some volcanic eruption at one point. Now we're dealing with the return of the plague. Nothing is going to plan. So I thought I'd take the opportunity, seeing as I'm stuck at home for the majority of the time, you can't go see friends, you can only go to the shops for essential goods and services. I thought I would revisit a project that I did a long time ago. This was before I filmed anything, and I made this Damascus steel ring. Now, this was the first ring that I ever made, and it was the first time I'd even attempted Damascus steel. There were a lot of firsts involved in this, and I didn't do it the right way. Even inserting this silver internal band, I basically got a wide piece of silver, stuck it inside the Damascus band, and then just folded over the edges. So if you have a close look at this, you can see cracks. The silver itself cracked under the strain of being formed in such a way. I was a novice jeweler. I still am. I have no formal jewelry training, but I wanted to reattempt this project with a little bit more know-how and some additional tools of the trade. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how you take something like this, silver, strips and bars of silver, which you can buy online and they come pre-processed. I got this at about, I think, 1.5 millimeter thick and 6 millimeter one. I don't know. I don't work in actual numbers. I just say, that looks about right. And as you can imagine, things don't always work out for me. But I'm going to show you how to take this silver, this block of two types of steel. This is a Damascus block halfway through the process. It has no real pattern to it. It looks very unremarkable. It's just a heavy bit of steel. And I'm going to show you how to take those two things and turn them into something like this, but a little bit more beautiful, because this, as I said, my very first attempt. So, if you've never seen anything Damascus related, I do have another video on my channel where I tried to make a Damascus short sword. Ooh, I still have it around here somewhere. This short sword, I made this, a good number of months ago. Now, it's not heat treated, it's not that, well, it's a little bit sharp and it's a little bit pointy, but there are heaps of issues with this because the steel didn't quite fuse together. I've got rust appearing all through it. I've improved my technique. I've improved the anvil and my hammer striking abilities, so this block shouldn't have any of those issues. But let's start on the process. For starters, I've cut this piece of sterling silver to 66.3 millimeters. That should give me a size 10 ring. The next thing I need to do is bend it around a mandrel. And you'll also notice me flattening the silver. What that's going to do is it's going to make it easier for me to solder this together into one single band, and then you can stretch it back out into a circle later on, and your task is going to be that much easier once it's all connected. So what I'm going to be using for the soldering is this Easy Solder. Now, the website that I get my silver from, there are 3 types of solder. There is easy, medium, and hard solder. Basically, they just have different melting points based on the alloy metals that they put in with the silver. So this one should have a relatively low melting point, which is going to make it easier for me to solder this joint together without actually melting the rest of the ring. Now, for soldering silver, basically all you need is this stuff. This is going to be your flux, and it's going to help everything move nicely and also try to prevent some oxidation. And this stuff is, well, as it says, poisonous. So please don't eat this, please don't drink this. Please try to, treat it like a chemical. The easiest way that I found to put this on is, you just take this off, and then basically you just dip your finger in. I'm kidding, please. Please don't do that. I'm joking, everyone. I'm joking. But basically what I do use is this itty-bitty little, this teeny tiny flathead screwdriver, because I find having that flat face, it kind of allows me to, spread it like that, and if there's like a little cracky area, I can, put the flat head of the screwdriver into it and try to, work this into all the cracks. So a little flathead screwdriver has actually been, one of the best ways to apply this, I have found. I could have just used a brush. If I was a smart human being, I could have just used a brush, but I didn't. So anyway, just apply enough flux. All that you require for the task that you are performing, that's really all you need. Now, also what I've done is this soldering wire, hold on, focus. This soldering wire, you could apply it straight from the wire, but it's just easier, I find, if I get a little wire clipper, and I've basically clipped it into these tiny little flakes. I'll see if I can get the camera to even focus on this. Come on. Come on, yep, tweezers. There you go. You can't even see that, but there is a little bit of silver in there. Nope. I'll tell you why you can't see it. I dropped it. There is no silver in my tweezers anymore. Anyway, point being, I've lost it now. I basically have used clippers to cut these into very, very fine little chips, and I'm just going to be placing them along that line that I want to solder together. So let's do that before I lose any more of these things, because they are so teeny tiny. And boop, there's one. So you don't need much of this solder, you really only need enough that's going to fill that gap. That could already be too much, but that's okay. I think any excess is going to end up on the inside of this ring, and we're going to be polishing that out anyway later on. And I guess that'll just mean that when it comes to polish the internal surface of this ring, if I need to remove any material to expand it slightly to properly fit my finger, we'll handle that at that point. So now, I do not have the appropriate heating apparatus. What you probably should have is a very small little blowtorch. I have this food grade blowtorch. You will see these in kitchens, or like home cooks will be using these if you're making like a souffle and you need to like torch the top. Actually, I don't know if that's what you do for souffle, but anyway, no, creme brulee, that's what I'm trying to think of. Anyway, I've got this one. You can get these at you can get these for about $6 to $10 at, kitchen shops where they supply these sorts of things, and it just goes with these gas cylinders. You just clip that on the top, and this one is leaking for some reason. That's really not good. Come on, stop leaking. Oh dear. Oh dear. Okay, so now with all that done, I've got this silver ring which fits on my finger. To create the two edges, or the two lips that will hold the Damascus in place, I'm basically going to recreate the exact same process, but do it a size up. So where my finger was a size 10, this ring would obviously have an external circumference which is greater than that of my finger, because there's, an extra layer of material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to size the ring, find out how much the outside of the ring is, and then I make two larger rings out of this stuff. Alright, so this would be a very tight squeeze. So the ring, the outside surface of the ring is a size 13. So I've got a size 10 for my finger, and I'm gonna make two size 13 rings, which are gonna form the lips that run either side. So basically I'm gonna have this internal ring, two external rings, and then sandwiched in the middle of those two outer rings will be the Damascus steel insert to create the ring that I wanna wear on my finger. So I'm going to jump into that. I've got my internal ring, I just need to make two more ones, then I can jump over to the lathe over there and I can turn the Damascus steel insert, because at the moment it is a very basic looking disc. It's come out of the forge, it's been flattened, it's been squished, and it's just a disc. I need to put a hole in the center, I need to then expand that hole out sideways. I then need to carve the outside down to turn it into a ring which will just slip over this one as a little sheath. Let's dive right into it. So after a bit of tedious hammering, I've got these two rings. They are now straight, there are no bows or warps in them, and they are more or less perfectly circular, or close enough for what I need it to do. I now have everything ready to go. We have finished lathing the Damascus steel ring. So it occurs to me now that I'm sitting there with a completed Damascus ring, but at no point have I actually introduced how that came about. So let's rewind the clock back to another day when I was actually forging the steel required, and how I turned that lump of steel into the Damascus ring. The first thing we're going to be doing is making the Damascus steel billet. My concept for this project is going to be making a billet, folding it once, stretching it out again, twisting it, and then cutting it into little pancakes, which I can then turn into rings like this. But why tell you any more about it? I'm just going to show you how it happens. And so, with some very basic welding, because I will be the first to admit I am not an expert on the matter, I think I have now used the welder 5 times, if that, because it's a very recent purchase, but the things it enables me to do, the many times, well, I say the many times, the last couple of times, which are the first couple of times I've ever made Damascus steel, I somehow managed to forge weld it all together without having first fused it into a block like this. How I did that, I don't know. I basically just had to hold it very carefully and do some very delicate hammer strokes to just set it enough so that I could then come in with a couple more powerful strikes and actually get it to fuse together. Now, I have a block of, you know, welded together metal on the end of a stick, and that stick is another piece of rebar. So, it is, because it is now quite solid, and it's not going to fall apart on me. What this means is now we're going to take it to the furnace, we're going to fuse this together, we're going to stretch it out, fold it, twist it, and then we can turn the resulting pattern welded steel into a ring. And I think that is the most exciting part. So let's just smash this out as quickly as we can and then move on to the interesting stuff. Alright, so this looks like absolutely nothing at this point. This here is our little disc of Damascus steel. It's bubbled, it's dark, it's dull, it's covered in all these oxides, so it looks like absolutely nothing special. But I can assure you, when this is polished up and set in acid, it's going to look like something entirely different. So this here is my newest addition to the workshop, a turning lathe, because I have made this ring before. The very first time I did this ring, I was able to drill a hole through the center, and I'm not going to tell you how many drill bits I burned out doing it that way, because this steel, it's, like, I don't know why, I don't know if I need to normalize the steel a lot more, but I've always found that when I'm trying to drill through it, it's a pain in the ass. So I got a lathe, and also this way it means that I can make this perfectly round in all dimensions, very well balanced. Basically, this is a better ring making device, but it can be done on a drill, and then after that, to do the outside, I stuffed a bit of wooden dowel through it, went to the grinder and spun it around as I ground. That made it into a circle. Whether or not it's a perfect circle, couldn't be sure. This way, I can be sure. So let's get this turned into something a little bit shinier and a little bit nicer. Let's get a hole punched through the center that's going to fit around this ring, around the center of it, the same as with the other two side bits, and then we can start the assembly process. Okay, so now that I've shown you how I ended up with a Damascus sleeve, let's go back to the assembly process. But at the moment it doesn't look like all that much because we haven't revealed the pattern. I have the internal ring, I have the 2 external rings, and when it is all assembled, should look something like... It's like a jigsaw puzzle. At this point, you just clip everything together, get it all set in place, and there you have it. The ring. Silver, Damascus, silver, and it fits on my finger. Obviously, it's all falling apart now because I haven't soldered any of that together. But it gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. So, let's reveal the pattern, because you could create the ring, set it all in place, and then dip the whole thing in acid, but on this occasion, I think I'm going to acid etch the internal sleeve first. And the way I'm going to be acid etching today is I just have the lid of a candle jar. I'm going to put the ring inside the lid and pour in some hydrochloric acid. Now, I use hydrochloric acid. I think there are some other acids that you might be better off using. Sulfuric, I think, sometimes can be used in this process. But for me, since pool acid is very easy to come across, it might be a bit slower. Potentially, sulfuric would work faster and I wouldn't have to etch it for as long. But I'm happy to spend the time because it's cheap, it's easy for me to access, and all I need to do is leave this sitting in the bath of acid for about 20 odd minutes. And with all of that soldering done, I am now left with this basically finished ring. I mean, it's all in one piece. I wouldn't necessarily call it finished because, as you can see, it looks like nothing special at all. The metal in the center has oxidized black. The silver is dull and almost grey. The flux has kind of bubbled and gone all different shades of yellow and brown and green. It looks like an absolute mess. But that's fine. We're going to hide all of those sins by polishing and buffing and sanding this back. I need to do that anyway because I don't know if you can quite tell with this camera angle, but these 2 ridges, they pop up higher than the internal center. I mean, that's fine. I expected that much anyway, and I do want to round over the edges. So now, it is back to the lathe. I'm going to put this in, it's going to start spinning, and we are going to sand down the edges to have a nice little rollover on both sides. We are also going to sand out the internal, polish that, make it nice and smooth to fit on and off a finger. We're going to curve the edges there as well, turn it into a bit of a comfort fit. Alright, so I finished up on the lathe and the ring kind of looks amazing. Although, it could look more amazing because, see, I acid etched the Damascus prior to assembling the ring. My concept for that was leaving it out of acid once the silver was all around it, because just in case there were any gaps, any cracks that the acid could seep through, I didn't want that sitting on the inside of the ring where you couldn't get access to it and it would just slowly erode away at things. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that that's a proper thing to worry about. I mean, yes it is, but the ones that I've made before, I have acid etched it after assembling, and I haven't really encountered any issues where the acid has leached inside and then wreaks havoc on the ring. The thing is, if I was concerned about that, I could just take the ring out of the acid, put it in water for a while, let it sit there, shake it around for a bit, hopefully any water would then seep into the ring as well, displace the acid, so on and so forth, and then you can just put it in the oven, maybe at about 50-60 degrees for 1 hour. That should evaporate all the water out of the ring, and then you're left with a perfectly dry ring that's got no water on the inside, no acid on the inside. But my concept was to avoid all of that, but then when I had it on the lathe, I had to sand deeper than I would have liked just to get rid of all the silver around the edges, and then that got rid of the pattern. So, it's back in the acid, it's cooking for a little while longer. Once it is done, you guys will get to see the final finished product, and I will finally have a brand new ring that has been manufactured to my standards. There is a little bit of a way to go. I have noticed that now most of this comes from the Damascus disc. The one that I was working with, it wasn't quite big enough. Plus I did encounter some issues on the lathe where I wasn't able to get the edges perfectly aligned and flat. Looking at the ring now, I can see what that has caused in the final finished product. There are a couple of gaps here and there, but they are very, very small, and I can really only locate them by running my fingernail around the edge, and wherever it catches, I know that I could have made it a little bit more perfect. So, in the future, I'm going to take a little bit more care and caution with the lathe work, and now that I have a whole assortment of new lathe bits, I should be able to get them all perfect and spot on. So I'm going to give it a bit of time. I'm going to go inside and play some Star Wars Fallen Order, maybe watch some Netflix, I don't really know, because this needs about another 20 or 30 minutes. And that is the beauty of making these rings. When it gets around to the acid etching stage, you put it in your acid, set a timer, and then go away, do something else, and you come back to a masterpiece, because up until the point that it comes out of the acid etch, you've got no idea what the pattern looks like. I have, in this instance, had a sneak peek because I did get to see the pattern before, and so I'm very excited to see the final ring with the pattern, with the silver around each side. It is going to look spectacular. So let's give it the time that it needs and come back when it's ready. I'm back, and I've just pulled this ring out of the water. Sorry. What am I talking about? I've pulled this ring out of the acid and I've dipped it in water to basically, well, look, I want to say neutralize the acid. If I wanted to neutralize the acid, I should have put some bicarb soda in the water to start with. But basically all I did is I washed away the acid. No neutralization has occurred, but here it is. It is now dry. Now here's the interesting thing. Do not get dismayed. If you do these sorts of projects and you pull this out of acid and then pull it out of the water, do not get dismayed because the whole thing is going to look very dark. But dry it off and rub a little bit, not too much, just rub gently with like a cloth or some fabric, and you're gonna reveal that pattern you should get. This camera's not gonna do it justice at all. You know what? Roll the beauty shots, because I need to show you guys what this looks like. Yeah, so seeing that after pulling this ring out of the acid was the most rewarding thing of this entire project. And this project has taught me a lot. So this ring, this is the third ring that I've actually made. This one took me a couple of days. So making the steel did take longer than I had hoped, and then making the making the Damascus steel ring on the lathe took a lot more effort than I thought. The carbide cutting bit that I needed to expand the hole, that one did break and I didn't have any replacements, but I've now got some replacements, and I also worked out why it broke in the first place, so I can try and avoid that in the future, because the carbide bits, they're not too cheap. But if not for those minor setbacks, I would say a ring like this could be done within a day. And that is also including making the Damascus steel from scratch. If you're working quickly and efficiently, you probably can stretch it out, fold it, stretch it again, and then twist it. All in a day's work, and then still have time left over to make the ring, if you were working quickly. If not, you could probably make a Damascus steel rod. That's going to supply you with about 10 Damascus steel sleeves that you can make rings with. So you've got 10 rings lined up ready to go. You then make your silver inserts and all of the silver rings. You can do that in about, I want to say, less than an hour if you're working quickly and have had a little bit of practice. If you haven't had any practice, and also like me in this project, it did take me a couple of hours to get it all right, but All things considered, this ring is about a 1 to 2 day project from start to finish if you've got all of the tools and equipment set up ready to go and you know a little bit about what you're doing. Otherwise, if you've got the tools or something similar, if you've got ways that you could make this work and you've got a bit of time, put a week aside, learn how to make rings, learn how to make Damascus steel rings. These are super fun to make. I want to say super easy, relatively. I've done some other projects. I mean, I made a sword, I have, made a leather belt. That one was probably pretty easy, but considering the relative ease with which you can create something as beautiful as this, I would say give it a go. You don't necessarily need a forge, you don't necessarily need a lathe, those sorts of things just make it easier. I have made, actually, the first ring that I made that using a handheld drill, the silver that I ordered online, and also this butane torch for all of the soldering purposes. I used a hammer and a lump of metal in the shape of a ball, which I used to basically, flange out the edges, and then I folded those edges over, if you can imagine that. So I had my ring of silver, and then I put the Damascus around that, and then on either side it stuck out about half a centimeter, and I just folded those edges all the way over around the sides, if that makes sense. So there are ways that you can do these projects without all of the tools and equipment that I have. I've just built these up over the years and they do make things easier, but they are not essential. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. This is now my ring. It's a replacement for the old one, which is somewhere, I don't even know where, and I am thrilled to have something like this on my finger again. So, if anyone out there is interested in getting one, I don't know when this is going to happen, but I am making Damascus steel rods. I am getting myself set up to hopefully start making these, so if the interest exists, I am happy to make them, and then I'll put them up online. I'll probably modify the description on this video, so if a website goes live with these rings ready for sale, come back here, check in, and hopefully you'll know. Otherwise, I'll put it on my Instagram. I'll let the world know somehow. And if you're thinking of making one yourself and you have the bare minimum of tools required, if you've got a drill, if you've got a hammer, if you've got a hard surface to hammer things out on, if you've got a Bunsen burner, you can order some silver online. You can even order Damascus steel online, so you wouldn't even need to make that yourself. You can give it a go. But otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video, which could be who knows when. My upload schedule has been terrible, and I take full responsibility for that. I really don't know what I'm doing with my life, but I'm trying, and that's the most important thing. And also, given the current state of things, I wish everyone well. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and stay indoors if at all possible. Take care until then, and see you next time. Bye.